Hi, this is Duke Ralston from the Reaper's Digest. I want to thank you for listening to the show, and I wanted to ask you to buy the Reaper's Digest a cup of coffee. Just go to Ko-fi.com/tennessemacabre and send us a tip. Thank you again.
Welcome to a night.
Hello and welcome to the Reaper's Digest podcast, the podcast where we dissect the best and worst in horror, science fiction, and fantasy. My name is Blake Ray, and I am joined by my co-host,
Duke Ralston.
And we're here to, hang out with y'all for a little while.
Absolutely. Hang out with you guys and some of our favorite horror.
Mm-hmm.
We got a humdinger tonight, don't we?
Oh, yeah. One we've been dancing around.
Yes.
You kind of got to address it. It's the elephant in the room.
Yes.
We're talking about Dracula tonight.
Absolutely. And Dracula, well, you could write a book about Dracula. I mean, this is one of...
I think they did. That's sort of why we're here, right?
They've written several.
Mm-hmm.
This is one of the most influential novels of the last 150 years.
I would say so.
It would have to be in the top 5.
Yeah.
Maybe top 10. Maybe top 5. Huge.
I don't think there's a character that's been adapted more.
I don't think so either.
You know?
I don't think so either. So, it's one of those things we're gonna sit down and talk about the book tonight.
Yeah.
And in our next podcast, I believe we're going to tackle some of the many, many screen adaptations.
We are, or at least try to.
Or at least try to.
There are a ton of them.
Yeah. You need about a 5-hour podcast just to tackle the ones Christopher Lee's been in.
Yeah. What's your favorite one?
Oh, dear. So I think my favorite one is probably Bram Stokers Dracula.
I love that one.
I love that one. Of course, I love Bela Lugosi as Dracula. And here is a surprise favorite of mine. I like the Spanish version of the Universal Dracula.
It's really surprisingly good.
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
And in and of itself is a huge influence on Mexican horror.
Yeah. So Dracula crosses a lot of cultural boundaries.
Yes.
And a lot of literary boundaries.
Yes.
Which we'll talk about. It's heavily involved with, like, the taboo and the comedy of manners of the age.
Yes.
But also, there's something timeless about it.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. It addresses sexuality. Or rather, it struggles hard, the novel struggles hard not to address sexuality while addressing sexuality, if that makes sense.
Yeah. You couldn't just write a bodice ripper back then.
No, you couldn't.
He got close, though, didn't he?
He did get as close as you could get.
Yeah.
It addresses class.
It does.
There's a lot to peel back. There's a lot of layers on this onion.
Oh, yeah. I would say it's more like an avocado, just petals and petals,
Yeah, exactly.
An avocado of horror.
Avocado of horror. Dracula.
Man, they should have let me write the blurb.
Yes.
Full disclosure.
Uh-huh.
I used to teach at the college level, as some of you know. And I taught this book for 4 straight years in a lit class.
Wow.
So I've read this book at least 8 times in the last couple of years.
Okay.
I notice something every time I read it.
Yeah, yeah. It is it's not that long of a book.
It's really not.
It's an incredibly dense book. And I think the format that it's told in lends itself to denseness. It's
Yes.
not an easy read.
It really is not. It's a surprisingly challenging read to be so popular.
Yes.
Usually things that play with form and substance this much don't get popular.
Right.
But this really does.
Yeah.
And I think part of it is that it was sort of a take on what was popular of the day, the epistolary novel.
Yes.
For those of you that don't know, the epistolary novel is one of the first novel forms, and it's told through letters or journal entries. Mm-hmm. Dracula is told in the exact same way. It's a combination of journal entries, letters, dictation, and transcripts of a recorded journal.
Yes.
So, it was playing off a very familiar formula and using that to sort of invade the everyday with something very macabre.
Yes. One of the neat ironies of this is that it has that scientific feel. It's written, a lot of the entries are written like case studies.
Yes.
But it has that scientific feel, and it's heavy on tech, and it's the tech of the day. Mm-hmm. They talk about how much they love their phonographs and their typewriters and their yet it's talking about something that's an ancient evil.
Yeah.
So there's this weird juxtaposition of rational versus supernatural.
And let's get back to that in a minute. Let's put a pin in that, because that's a really interesting point.
I jumped ahead. I couldn't help it. I'm excited.
I am too. As much as we give this novel hell, it's really a good book.
It's a great story. It's a great story.
It's a great story. I don't know if it's the world's best written piece of fiction.
No, I don't think it is, but the story is very good.
Yeah. So, just a little bit of background. Dracula was published in 1897 by Bram Stoker. Mm-hmm. Now, Bram Stoker himself was from Dublin, Ireland. He was enrolled at the University of Dublin and attended Trinity College. He studied mathematics, graduated with honors. Right?
Yeah.
He did 10 years in civil service, and he sort of got involved with the theater, right?
Yes.
So, from that...
Scandalous.
Yeah, scandalously involved in the theater. So, from that, we get the author of Dracula. Now, part of it is he read a book called Beyond the Forest, mm-hmm. or Beyond the Land of the Forest. And that book was about Romanian folklore. Mm-hmm. That's where he gets the name Dracula, which means son of the dragon. Mm-hmm. Right? Dracula was a real guy, properly named Vlad Tepes, or Vlad the Impaler.
Yeah, real warm and fuzzy guy.
Oh yeah, used to impale all his victims, hence the nickname.
Yes.
And he would dine amongst their corpses. So,
man's got to eat.
Yeah, you can't beat it for ambiance, right?
Right.
So, Bram Stoker reads this book, and vampires were a pretty popular literary subject even coming into this time, right? He didn't write the first vampire novel. I think a lot of people sort of mistake that, right?
Right.
But he wrote the most famous, of course. Yep. So, basically, to give you a rundown of the story, it's journal entries, letters, telegrams, transcripts. It all starts with Jonathan Harker, who's a lawyer out of London who travels to Transylvania to meet with a Count Dracula, who is a client of his firm. He's purchasing real estate for Dracula. So he's going there to finalize this property transaction. When he arrives, he tells the locals where he's going, and they're not happy about it.
Not at all.
To say the least. They're like, you shouldn't go there. They offer him a crucifix. Anyway, long story short, he goes to the castle. Very famous trip through the Borgo Pass. Mm-hmm. Excellent sequence in the novel.
Yes.
Also in a lot of the film adaptations. But he gets there, he meets Dracula, who is like kind of older, pale, gaunt. Harker becomes concerned when he cuts himself shaving and Dracula lunges at his neck. Later, Harker realizes he's a prisoner there. He can't leave. He's seduced by these 3 female vampires and barely escapes. So, he's kind of learned Dracula's secret when he sees him crawling down the side of the castle like a lizard. And he realizes something's up.
That's kind of a giveaway.
The last time I saw that, well, let's just say I was having a lot more fun.
Yeah.
But, so he assumes that he is going to be the Count's next victim, which is probably right. And the Count, after a brief altercation, leaves Harker trapped in the castle. Cut to England. Harker's fiancée, Mina, is visiting her friend Lucy, who has recently gotten engaged after declining many suitors. Lucy is kind of a good-looking woman, a very modern woman at the time, right?
Right.
So, she's also had trouble with Lucy sleepwalking, right? Mm-hmm. Mina finds her outside near a graveyard, and there's sort of this shape hovering above her. Then Mina notices 2 small red marks on Lucy's neck, and assumed she must have been pricked with a pin or a briar or something like that.
Right.
So Lucy falls ill. So Mina's worried about her, but she's called away by correspondence from Jonathan. Lucy goes into the care of Dr. Seward and his old mentor, Dr. Seward being one of the turned down suitors, and his old mentor, Dr. Van Helsing, who tries to do a blood transfusion, which, by the way, was cutting edge technology at the time.
Yep.
And there's a number of blood transfusions. Then Van Helsing realizes this is not something medical science can cure. He decorates the room with garlic and crucifixes, which saves Lucy briefly until her mother clears the room of garlic. I believe it was either the mother or the maid. I can't remember right this second. But yeah. The room is cleared of garlic, and Lucy dies. After her death, there's the report of a creature attacking children in the area. When Jonathan was able to escape the Count's castle, he was nursed back to health by nuns. He returns to England with Mina, and they're now married. And they got married at the nunnery. So, Jonathan's accounts of Dracula lead Van Helsing to believe that Lucy contracted vampirism and is the one tormenting the children. Under the nom de plume of the Buford lady.
I love that.
Yeah. Which is, I guess, a little kid's lispy way of saying the beautiful lady.
Yes.
So, they unearth Lucy's corpse, stake her through the heart, cut off her head, stuff her mouth with garlic, and free her. So now that Lucy's been taken care of, the group decides to track down Count Dracula and the dirt he brought with him, because according to lore, you need the dirt of your home country. So they destroy the boxes. Dracula has no means of regeneration. Then, one night, amid feelings of uneasiness, Van Helsing and Seward break into Mina's room to find Jonathan unconscious and Mina drinking blood from a gash in Dracula's chest. The vampire disappears and returns to Transylvania, only to be followed by the group. They follow him in steam engines, steamboats. Dracula travels in very traditional ways. We'll get into that later. They find him buried in the final box of dirt and cut off his head and stab him through the heart. But in the fight with the local Romani people, who are the servants of the vampire, Quincy Morris, one of the suitors, is killed. So that's basically the whole of Dracula. It is... Do what?
In a nutshell.
In a nutshell.
But boy, there's a lot of it to get into.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, first and foremost, this is a traditional Gothic narrative.
Oh, yeah.
So let's start there. Let's start with the idea of the Gothic in general.
Okay.
So, in the most general terms, Gothic literature is defined as writing using dark, picturesque scenery, startling, melodramatic narrative devices, and an overall atmosphere of mystery, fear, and dread.
Right.
I further would say that the Gothic always includes inversion or perversion,
Yeah.
madness or the supernatural,
Yes.
and isolation.
Okay. Yeah.
So, your very classic Gothic literature,
Mm-hmm.
stuff like The Castle of Otranto,
Mm-hmm.
Cable Williams,
Mm-hmm.
some of that Ground Post stuff,
Right.
those all have all of those elements.
Yes.
My question for you, Duke, is do you think this is traditional Gothic, or is it more of a hybridization?
Okay. I don't think anything about this, and it's hard to say this in 2022, looking back at 1897.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't think anything about this is written to be traditional.
No, I don't think so.
It is a love letter to modernism. So it is Gothic. It is not traditional Gothic.
No. That idea of isolation is broken,
Yes,
I think.
definitely, because there is a strong a strong relationship between Mina and the four guys there.
Yeah.
It is ironic, a little bit of irony that I never thought of until just now, that at the opening of the novel, three of those guys propose to Lucy.
And are rejected.
And two of them are rejected. One is accepted. Doesn't she accept Arthur's proposal?
Arthur Homewood. You've got... Let's see.
By the end of the novel, they're all around Mina.
Mm-hmm. I think in a lot of ways, this idea of protecting womanhood,
Yes.
is very important to the novel.
Oh, yes. Even up until the point of being willing to kill the woman.
Yeah.
Because we see Arthur, of course, kills Lucy. Or doesn't kill her, but destroys her vampire form.
Yes.
And then there is a scene where Mina makes Jonathan promise to kill her, and even goes so far as to gather all the men and have Jonathan read her the last rite.
Mm-hmm.
and tells him it's his duty, as it is every man's duty, to kill their women to protect them.
Yeah, it is. It is really strange.
Yeah.
This idea of protection of women.
Yes.
In the novel, Mina, of course, cannot accept the host by the end because she's been tainted by Dracula's blood.
Yes.
In fact, and what I think is probably one of the most compelling visual elements in the novel, they press a holy wafer to her head, and it burns into her skin.
Yes.
Which is, she's then marked and calls herself unclean, which is, of course, what lepers in the Bible would call out. Unclean, unclean.
Yes.
Yeah. So the idea of curing or healing is important there.
Yes.
Now, I think Lucy is definitely the more modern of the two women.
Yes.
Because she talks about how she wishes she could accept all of the suitors.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, there's this polyamorous, bigamous desire in Lucy.
Yes.
Also, Lucy, let's get into the blood transfusions.
Yeah.
This means something different at the time. Right?
Right.
Mingling of blood is considered sexual, right?
Yes.
The congress between two people, that intimacy, is sexual.
It's sexual.
And Lucy gets blood from all of the men in the novel.
Right.
So she's effectively had her chastity called into question.
Yes.
She does tempt the suitors with a quote-unquote kiss when she's becoming a vampire.
Yes.
So you say nothing about this was traditional, but I think in a lot of ways, Lucy's promiscuity or implied promiscuity is punished with a very puritanical kind of punishment, right?
Yeah, she gets her head cut off and her mouth stuffed with garlic. I mean, it's pretty brutal.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, not to mention the stake through the heart.
Yeah, oh yeah, I forgot about that.
Yeah. I bet she didn't. Talk about heartburn.
Yeah.
Garlic.
Wow. But yeah, and that's absolutely true. That is a very a brutal way to deal with sexuality.
It is. It reminds me of John Carpenter later, when they asked him about popularizing the slasher genre.
Yeah.
He said, "I didn't mean to kill the sexual revolution."
I was not familiar with that. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, because free love seemed a lot less, free when Jason Voorhees is stalking around, right?
Yeah.
So, but there's a lot of different ways to read this novel. Yeah. I think the sex and sexuality, that's the one I usually hit with the students because it keeps their attention.
Right. It is definitely a huge element.
Yeah. I mean, that moment where Mina's feeding from Dracula's breast. One, that's shocking.
Yes.
To the people at the time, and even now, it's a very shocking image. Yeah. Because that idea of blood as communion is an inversion of Christianity. And then taking it from the breast is an inversion of motherhood.
Yes. A man's breast.
Yes. He is able to create despite being a man, and therefore it must be destroyed, right?
Yes.
So there's a lot of hints at sort of a, Lucy is corruption of the innocents, right?
Yes.
But because she is chaste. She's not married, and she hasn't punched her V card yet,
Right.
as it were, to put it indelicately.
Yeah.
She's not consummated with anyone yet.
Right. But she's playing around the edges.
Oh yeah.
And kind of wonder, and of course, there's nothing in the novel to indicate this, but I know people have interpreted Lucy and Mina's relationship on screen to be playing around the edges of lesbianism.
Which is interesting because one of the earlier vampire novels, Carmilla. One of the earlier vampire novels, Carmilla, doesn't play with that.
No.
It is full on.
Yes.
About a homosexual relationship and the dangers thereof.
Right.
You know?
Yes.
But yeah, there's sort of this bigotry or bigamy and polyamory and all that stuff sort of tied up in Lucy. And her relationship with Mina is very affectionate.
Yes, very affectionate and very close. And I could see, if I were shooting a film, I could see where I might take that liberty and wonder if that was going through Stoker's mind.
Well, and it is important to point out that Stoker's sexuality was questioned at the time, during his life and posthumously.
Yes.
So he might have been writing it that way.
Right.
As clearly as he could at the time.
Yeah. Exactly.
And this idea of a man giving birth and all this stuff, all these inversions and perversions of Christian doctrine is very interesting, right?
I like the fact, and one of the things that I seized on is rationalism and empiricism and capitalism versus traditionalism, Christianity, and the occult. Mm-hmm. Because there's a line in there, and I've got it here, where the woman tries to give Harker a crucifix. And he says, let's see, taking a crucifix from her neck, offered it to me. As an English churchman, I've been taught to regard such things in some measure as idolatrous.
Mm-hmm.
So it's almost as if, yes, I'm a good English churchman, but I don't go along with that Christian idolatry.
Well, and that's very much a difference between, like you said, the old world and the new world, right?
Yes. A very rational approach to Christianity.
Yeah, which Church of England was a rejection of Catholic doctrine.
Right.
Mostly about divorce, but they threw in some idolatry there too.
But it has the effect for me that it almost reduces the use of the cross against Dracula and the use of communion wafers and even the prayers, because Van Helsing is not a priest; he's a doctor,
a scientist. Yeah,
a scientist. So it's more like a wizard using magical instruments and a magical spell than it is like a priest saying mass.
I would go even one step further and say, rather than a wizard, it's like a craftsman using tools.
Yeah, I could buy that.
Because he does not think, if he were to, according to Catholic doctrine, if the host is corrupted, all the host is corrupted.
Right.
And yet he is just using it sort of willy-nilly.
Yes.
Yeah. He crushes it up, scatters it around, wedges it indoors.
Which would never happen in an Episcopal church either. Church of England doesn't do that either. So there's a disregard for sacredness of Christianity.
Yeah. And do you think Dracula, in a way, represents sacredness?
Yes.
Okay. Because he sort of has to, right?
Yes. Because he has to, in the sense, because the cross stops him.
Mm-hmm.
He cannot deal with the cross. He cannot deal with the host. He cannot deal with holy water. So, in a negative way, he emphasizes the sacredness of those things.
So it's like, if there's an enemy, there must be a hero.
There must be a hero. Exactly.
Yeah. If these things have power over the darkness, then they have power inherent.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, we're also looking at modernity versus
Yes.
feudalism, basically.
Right.
Because Arthur Homewood, who is one of the suitors, the one that Lucy accepts, he also is a nobleman.
Yes.
He's very well off. And he represents the upper crust of English society.
Yes.
Quite literally.
Yep.
And Dracula is a different kind of nobleman.
Yes.
He's a feudal lord.
Yes. Homewood is not.
No.
He is a descendant of feudal lords, but feudalism has long since died in England by this time.
Yeah, he's just got a title and a bloodline.
And a lot of money.
And a lot of money. But it's almost like, you know, the way Dracula feeds off the peasantry.
Yes.
Is the way feudalism feeds off of the backs of the worker.
Exactly. The scene where Dracula goes out and brings the baby to his wives is, that is the Lord literally feeding off of his people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It is a rather heavy-handed metaphor.
Yes.
But an apt one, I think.
Oh, yeah. I mean, feudalism, particularly the further east you go, the more brutal it became. And it was brutal in England. But when you talk about feudalism in Russia, for instance, the feudal system existed until 1860.
Yeah.
And it was brutal.
Mm-hmm. You're looking at the Carpathians, which, Transylvania, for those of you who have not been there, I taught English there for a little while. It is gorgeous, but it is remote and it's harsh.
Yes.
So, what little you have is now being taken by a lord.
Yeah. Which is what they do.
Yeah. It's the essence of feudalism.
Right.
So, the more modern world defeating that is capitalism.
Right.
Defeating the older ways of life, right?
Right. But now here is an interesting thing, and I don't know that you would see this in a novel today. I don't know that you would see an embrace of capitalism that was so exuberant. It's from page 290. It said, "It made me think of the wonderful power of money. What can it not do when it is properly applied, and what it might do when basely used? I felt so thankful for that Lord Godalming is rich, and that both he and Mr. Morris, who also has plenty of money, are willing to spend it so freely. For if they did not, our little expedition could not start either so promptly or so well equipped." So,
wow,
there are a lot of red lights in that statement for me.
Oh yeah, I am not exactly a happy capitalist myself.
No. And that is just an exuberant embrace of British capitalism. Of course, Mina and Jonathan represent the middle class, the bourgeois in England. Mm-hmm. And there is just an embrace and a love of money that is so open. Like I say, I don't know that you would see that in a novel, a serious novel today.
Well, in the scene where they go to Carfax Abbey,
Yeah.
where Dracula's holed up with all of his coffins of grave dirt.
Yeah.
I believe it's Quincy, the American,
Uh-huh.
who swings at Dracula with a Bowie knife,
Yes.
and he cuts his pocket and gold pours out.
Yes.
So it's not money like Arthur or Dr. Seward have. It's old money.
Hello? Yeah.
Yeah?
I lost you there for a second.
Yeah, it's that old money.
Yeah. It is the difference between money and treasure.
Absolutely. I never thought of it like that, but it is absolutely the difference between money and treasure. So, what do you make of the idea of religion in this?
Oh, Lord. I think their religion is capitalism.
I think so, too.
I think that their religion is capitalism and rationalism.
It's very much a... but in a way, the book is almost a warning against that sort of base materialism, right?
Yes.
Because it doesn't matter how scientific you are, there are things you don't know.
Right.
As as the great Donald Rumsfeld, and great is in quotation marks, as the great Donald Rumsfeld once said, there are unknown unknowns. Things you don't know, you don't know.
That's right.
It's
a warning against that smugness.
Yeah.
Okay, and this is one that may get me in a little trouble here, but Dracula is often portrayed as good versus evil.
Mm-hmm.
That's certainly the way that Mina and Jonathan see it. But is it evil versus lesser evil? Big E versus little e evil? Because these people go to the Carpathian mountains
with a colonizer mindset, right?
But these people go into the Carpathian Mountains. Lord Godalming uses British power and influence to pave the way. He has someone at Lloyd's of London who's watching ships come into and out of harbors so that they know where Dracula is. They get to Gdansk.
Your guess is as good as mine on that pronunciation.
Buys a steamer to go upriver, and that is a lot like MacGregor Laird did in China. He built 2 ironclad steamers to sail up the Yellow River and basically conquer China for England in the Opium Wars. So it is an imperialist attack on this prince who's without a doubt evil, but I think it's little e evil versus big E evil.
Yeah, in a way, there's no real good guy.
No.
I think the closest you get is maybe Seward.
Yeah. Seward seems kind of innocent.
Yeah.
I would buy that.
Yeah. Maybe Quincy. Maybe.
Well, but you get hints that Quincy and Arthur in particular have, Quincy, Arthur, and Seward went to school together.
Yeah.
And Seward went on to medical school.
Mm-hmm.
But Quincy and Arthur went off adventuring.
Yeah.
And, they went and fought wars. These are soldiers, and they're kind of soldiers of fortune.
So, I think at the time that would have been celebrated, but In retrospect, it's not.
In retrospect, there's no doubt in my mind that Stoker wrote these guys to be heroes. I mean, these are British imperial heroes.
Mm-hmm.
And unless you're a Zulu, they're heroes.
Yeah.
If you're a Zulu, they're not.
No. Well, let's say a lot of people around the world.
Absolutely. You grab Zulu out of the bag.
Yeah. No, it's an apt description because that was an especially rough example.
Yes.
But the sun never setting on the British Empire is interesting to think about here, too.
Yes.
Especially with Dracula only being active at night.
Yes.
Or primarily active at night.
Yes.
That's something interesting. When you read this book, Dracula can walk during the day.
Right.
He's not destroyed by sunlight.
No.
He's just not nearly as powerful.
It's not his best time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Much like me before 8 or 9 in the morning. I'm powerless.
Yes. Yeah.
Before I've made my Starbucks run.
Before you've had a cup of coffee.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's also interesting that this is written by an Irishman.
Mm-hmm. Well, it is because
perhaps it's Stockholm syndrome.
I could see that.
Yeah.
I could easily see that. So I got an interesting question for you, Duke. Something I've been thinking about as I've been thinking about this novel over the last, couple days.
Uh-huh.
What do you think the ultimate takeaway that Stoker wanted us to have was?
I think the ultimate takeaway that Stoker wanted us to have was a triumph of West over East, a triumph of rationalism and science over religion and occult, and kind of an overall triumph of Britishism, I guess is a better way to put it. It's a very British novel.
It is an intensely British novel,
and it's written at what to the average Englishman on the inside would have seemed like the height of the British Empire. 4 years after the novel was written, Queen Victoria had her Diamond Jubilee or Silver Jubilee, 60th year on the throne, and there were 1,000 noblemen from different countries, India, Asia, that Britain ruled, that came to do obseisance to the Queen. So if you are an Englishman in 1897, if you're a historian looking back on it, there were a lot of cracks in the empire. But if you're an Englishman in 1897 in London, you are sitting on top of the world.
Gotcha. Until we got started talking about it, I think how intensely British the novel is sort of slipped me a little.
Yeah. It is intensely British. And I read this, and this has been so long ago that I read this. I didn't mention this. I grew up, my grandmother had a first edition copy of Bram Stokers Dracula.
Oh my God.
Yeah. So the first horror novel that I ever sat down and attempted to read, and I didn't finish it, I was probably in the second grade because I've always been a horror nut, but I would sit down and read that novel when I was at my grandmother's house. So I've grown up with this novel. But one of the things that I read many, many years ago was that Stoker had seen the play Crockett of Tennessee. And Quincy is based very loosely on Davy Crockett.
I mean, they both have the Bowie knife.
They both have the Bowie knife. Crockett died in Texas. Quincy is from Texas. But this is the only non-British influence on the good side. Well, that and Van Helsing. Van Helsing is Dutch.
Yeah. But
he's still kind of quasi-British.
Yeah, because of the Dutch East Indies Company.
Well, yeah, but I was thinking more of Quincy.
Yeah.
That by 1897, British Anglo-American relations had been pretty effectively restored, and there was a lot. Well, South Pittsburgh was a British factory town funded from London, so there was a lot of congeniality between the United States and Great Britain.
Also, Quincy's the only one who dies.
Quincy's the only one that dies. They killed the American.
Yeah.
And
Which reminds me.
Yeah.
When I was in Romania, they taught me a card game.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And I was playing, and I asked them after a little while what the name of the card game was, and they told me in Romanesque, you know?
Yeah.
I said, well, what does that mean?
Yeah.
And they all looked at each other, and the one guy kind of sheepishly, who I'd become friends with, looks at me and goes, it's called Kill the American.
Well, we are the new British Empire.
Yeah. Except instead of supplies, we just ship out soda.
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
But it is interesting. It does say a lot that of the two people that actually get to Dracula to kill him, one is Quincy, who's wounded and dying, and the other is Harker. And it says a lot about Anglo-American relations for the next century.
Yeah. Absolutely. It's a very interesting book. There's a lot, like we said, it's a lot of layers. It's an avocado of evil.
Yes.
I think at the heart, this book is really about modernity.
Yeah.
And the dangers of traditionalism.
Yeah.
Because we got to think, they use a phonograph. They use steamships. They use steam engines, steam locomotives. And that's how they outpace Dracula.
Yeah. They run him to ground.
Yeah.
Dracula underestimates, he's taught himself English. He's read all these different things about London. He knows the maps of London. He has studied England inside and out. But he underestimates how serious the resistance will be. He doesn't really understand.
Yeah, he expects everyone to bend the knee.
Yeah.
Because he is nobility.
Right.
It's an interesting book. There's a lot to it, and we're going to get into a lot more when we get into the film adaptation.
Oh, yeah.
Because everyone is like a different flavor of Dracula.
Yes.
Final thoughts on this book. You like it?
No.
No?
I love the story. It is a laborious read. Now, I will grant you, there's a lot of information that he puts in however many pages it is. Okay. But it is not a fun read. But it is a great story. I love the story. I just don't like the book.
Gotcha.
I don't like the I don't like the letter format.
Yeah.
It doesn't flow, and it's dense.
It's a very traditional format.
I agree.
Your first novel in English, Pamela, is an epistolary novel.
Right. Well, the New Testament is mostly epistolary.
Yeah. The epistles of St. John.
Yes.
Yeah. Not to be confused with the apostles.
Right.
Which, when I was a kid, I didn't know the difference. I was like, man, this St. John guy got his own apostles? He must have been really good. So, anyway, I was a dumb kid. But, I don't know. I gotta say, I like the book.
Yeah.
I think it's charming in a way.
Yeah.
It's definitely outsider art for the time.
Yes.
Because he wasn't like a writer,
Mm-hmm.
you know. And have you ever read any of his other stuff?
No, I haven't.
It's not great.
Yeah.
It's okay.
Yeah.
You know, but
he stumbled into something here. I think he was a good functional writer, not necessarily a good creative writer. I mean, you can't argue that he was good. He wasn't a good functional writer. But
I think
he stumbled into tapping some veins here that really worked.
Mm-hmm. I think he's a good storyteller.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Sorry about that, folks.
Wow. Timeout. You're in timeout. Think about what you've done. But, yeah, he sort of stumbled upon a sort of a wellspring of fear here that I think becomes very important later in Western culture.
Mm-hmm.
Which, say what you will, guy's a great storyteller.
He's a great storyteller. That's a great story. There's no way to argue that this isn't one of the greatest stories of the 19th century.
In a lot of ways, it reminds me of like what we talked about when we were talking about psychotronic cinema.
Yeah. This is a psychotronic story.
Yeah, because it's swinging for the fences. It may or may not technically get there.
Yeah.
But it's definitely swinging for the fences.
Swinging for the fences. I also think that he tapped in, whether this was knowingly or unknowingly, he tapped in to sexuality in a way that very few authors in his time did. Mm-hmm. And he did it at a time when sexuality was about to get, because from the roaring 90s up until the 1930s, you had a rejection of Victorian sexual mores. And it becomes, it's a party, with the exception of World War I. And I think he unknowingly hits that curve just right.
So maybe a little time and place going on too.
Place, yeah, time and place.
Yeah. So, the right story at the right time can change the world.
That's right. And it's loose enough to where you can probably read sexuality into it in ways that he did not intend.
Yeah, I mean, I always do, because I'm a very naughty boy, but as far as my literary leanings are,
Yeah. I know that he wrote sexuality into it, but for instance, what I was talking about earlier with Mina and Lucy, did he intend that as hints of lesbianism? We'll never know, but you can certainly read that into it.
Oh, I think you absolutely can.
Yeah.
And I don't want to fall into that puritanical just roommates kind of thing.
Yeah, I don't either.
With Achilles and his his body there, and I'm using body in quotations.
Right.
Because you don't go out and kill an entire army over a buddy.
No.
No.
You
You don't weep and hold the body like that.
Yeah.
It's revisionist, you know?
Yeah.
It's straight washing.
Playing poker in the tent at night, folks.
No. It's straight washing.
Yeah.
But I don't want to do that, but I also don't want to fall into that place where any close relationship is assumed to be sexual.
Right. That's right. I think that's what makes it work so well.
Mm-hmm.
Because you've got that leeway that you can read it either way.
Either way, they're kind of obsessed with each other.
Yes. Yes.
there's a certain amount of tension there.
Yes.
Now, whether that tension is between what we call the modern woman, Lucy, and Mina, who's a much more traditional woman,
Right.
or between two lovers who maybe have not consummated, maybe have.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
That's all up to interpretation, and, frankly, we're going to get into the nearly infinite interpretations of this movie.
Oh my gosh. There are a lot of them.
Oh, yeah.
And we start with one of the first horror movies ever made, Nosferatu.
Absolutely. Which is got an anniversary coming up, right?
Yes. It's going to be 100 years old this year. I've seen several dates given. I don't know what the actual date is, but we're just going to say it's 100 years old.
Yeah. 1922. 1922. Well, that's about it for me. What about you?
Well, I am, of course, I'm always promoting Tennessee Macabre. We're on, you can find us at tennessemacabre.com and follow us on social media. Of course, on Saturday night.
Start that over.
Yes. Okay. We did go to promotions because I lost you for.
Oh, yeah. I said, well, okay. Let's start with this. All right. So, what do you got to promote this week, dude?
Okay. Well, I am always promoting Tennessee Macabre. We are going to be we're going to be on at 10 o'clock on Saturday night Central Time on ITV Chattanooga, and we're going to be hosting an incredible show, The Snow Beast.
All right, and I am always promoting Blood Oaks, my band, my passion, my brothers. We are recording an EP right now, North Georgia Death Cult, which will be premiering soon. So everyone take care of yourselves, and we'll see you next time on the Reaper's Digest.
Thank you for choosing the Reaper's Digest podcast. Like and subscribe. Recommend us to your friends. Check us out on all social media outlets. We'll see you next time.